call this Flint City Council meeting to order. Roll, Madam Clerk. I'm sorry.
Mr. Mays.
Present.
Ms. Poplar.
Present.
Mr. Nolden.
Present.
Mr. Freeman.
Here.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
Mr. Neely.
Present.
Ms. Galloway.
Present.
Ms. Van Buren.
Present.
Mr. Kincaid.
Present.
Thank you.
I ask Councilman Neely to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Please all rise. And then remain standing. There's a couple of requests for a moment of silence for some individuals and organizations. So.
Pledge allegiance.
Moment of silence.
I'd like to have a moment of silence for the Ferguson incident. Thank you.
I'd also would ask everyone to keep in their prayers Grover Kirkland, who was a legend in our community and provided a wonderful service to a lot of young men and women in our community. Thank you. Thank you very much. There are no minutes this evening. There was a couple of issues. We had a lot of committee meetings this week, and also there was some issues with computer software programming, and so the minutes of the last meeting will be at our next meeting. So there's no minutes for us to review this evening.
Okay, Mr. President, the clerk and secretaries do a good job. I would move the minutes from last meeting approved with any corrections.
Okay, they've been moved. Is there support?
Support.
They've been moved and supported. Discussion? Roll, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mays.
Yes.
Ms. Poplar.
Yes.
Mr. Nolden.
Step down.
Okay, Mr. Freeman.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Neely.
Yes.
Ms. Galloway.
Yes.
Ms. Van Buren.
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid.
Yes.
Ms. Yes, 0.
And to my colleagues, as soon as the minutes are completed, you'll have a copy of them, and if there needs to be any additions or corrections at our next council meeting, we'll still have time to make them. So, thank you very much. Thank you, Councilman Mays, for getting that done for us this evening. We have a request for a special order for Chris Delmaroni. Chris is the chair of the Board of Review, and at this time, Chris, if you'd like to come and update us on some issues with taxes and the Board of Review.
Mr. President, before he starts, I want to just give one instruction to the person who is now videotaping our meetings. It's no longer Paul Herring, but just for the purpose of just to educate them about our council meetings, all meetings are official business, and they cannot be edited from start to finish because it will become a matter of record. And we have a new person back there, and Madam Clerk, if you can speak to that, because one, we want to make sure that these meetings are broadcast in its entirety as the meeting happens, and Mr. Bay probably can speak to the legality of that. But I think the emergency manager has took it upon themselves to hire. Remember, hire is the word. Another person to videotape these meetings. When we had a person like Paul Herring coming here using his own time, his own equipment in many cases without pay. But we want to make sure that this new person has an instruction, if he's being paid by the emergency manager, not to modify our meetings, not to use these meetings to use it against any particular council person or anything. These are official meetings of the city of Flint, and I want we to speak to that, if that's okay.
You would like me to speak to it at this point?
Yes.
The person hired, and I don't know the name of the person or the firm, was hired by the emergency manager to film all city council meetings. Per any instructions he received, they would have come from the emergency manager and not this particular body. But having said that, from a legal standpoint, as it relates to minutes of meetings and so forth, they're to be unedited, irrespective of who may have done the hiring and so forth. Because what you want basically would be a precise recording of everything that occurred at a particular meeting, no matter how good or bad it may have been. So again, the hiring was not done by the clerk or the council. Thank you.
And just a question to Mr. Bade. Mr. Bade, if these meetings, well, if the person who's videotaping this meeting, if it's paid with tax dollars, would that be accessible through Freedom of Information requests, and would that be accessible to the public as they have been in the past pursuant to being paid with tax dollars?
Yes, the video recording would be subject to the Freedom of Information Act and would be disclosable at the cost of reproduction. I will add that video recordings are not minutes, and I'm not aware of any legal requirement that prohibits the editing of a video recording. I agree completely with the city clerk and your point, Councilman Neely, that the video recording should not be edited, but I'm not aware of any legal requirement. That it's a city's decision to video record, and but that whatever it records would be voyable.
Right.
Mr. President.
One second, Mr. Councilman Mays. Are you Councilman Neely?
Yeah, I just want to make this point, though. This is important for how the public digests our meeting and reviews the actions that's taken on their behalf. And I will be the first, as an independent person, to sue any broadcast entity that will modify my image or depict this meeting as something different than actually an official meeting and/or will edit it to mislead the public. I will be the first. I guarantee it. I will do it. That's it.
Thank you. Councilman Mays, and then we're going to move on with the special
Yeah,
order.
Mr. President, I appreciate it. I know from talking to Paul, there was many a years that and months and weeks that he did it on his own time. I don't know if there had been any talks and negotiations. Jason Lawrence, Mr. Lawrence, tell me that this person for this meeting tonight is being paid $100. They will put it on YouTube. I say, will you put it on channel 17 as well? And we didn't get an affirmative response. So what I would do in light of what is happening and without me knowing the details, I would like to make a referral to the emergency manager and any appropriate officials to send me the details of what's going on as it relates to any new moves as it's relating to this videotaping of council meetings. I would like to know the details of who it is, what type of contract, for how long, have they talked or negotiated with Mr. Herring, do they plan to do YouTube and channel 17? And I would like to make those specific referrals to the emergency manager and see if we can get a quick response, maybe in about the next 7 to 10 days. I would like that if I could. And Mr. President, based upon the comments that I read in the paper when Mr. Early referred to our last meeting as antics and obnoxious, you know, we are individuals, and I've heard Mr. Early say those words before. You know, when he was asking me to resign, he talked about my antics and obnoxiousness, and since then I've got 3 not guilties. And he ain't apologized for that description yet. So I'm gonna take up for the city council. We are under a 5-minute time frame in some cases. It can rush you, it can make you act different. I told him that in the meeting with the Treasury this last week. I say, if you're sincere about us acting dignified and taking care of business, I challenge him to lift all the orders that crunches us into a time frame. So my colleagues wasn't there, but in front of the Treasury's Department, Mr. Workman, Mr. Heading them, I said, look, quit using those negative words to characterize this body antics and or obnoxious, because that sends a negative message to the community. I asked him to be a professional, quit using them words over and over, because Councilman Mays has heard them privately and he's been wrong as he talks about me, and now he's using them same words about the body, and now he's dealing with the recording of it. So let those referrals be made, and I would ask Mr. Early to, I won't call it to quit using them antics, but I would call him and request that he be more professional and that he dialogue with us a little better as it relates to the council and its meeting. And then finally, Mr. President, did you know about these changes?
I just found out when I walked through the door from Mr. Murphy.
And Mr. Murphy informed me, and then I talked to Mr. Herring, and Mr. Herring had been informed within 10 minutes from when I talked to him. And so I would like those referrals sent, and we'll wait to see if we get any specific answers to any relevant contracts, information, longevity of service, and will they continue Channel 17, and will they continue to negotiate with Mr. Herring?
Thank you, Councilman Mays, and without objections, I'll also order those referrals to the emergency manager. At this time, I apologize, Chris, but we wanted to take care of this issue that just come before us as we walked into the chambers this evening. So I want to thank you for being here and telling us some of the issues that you're going to present to this body about some of the tax changes that the Board of Review will be looking at this year. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, council members, and city clerk for this opportunity. First off, I'm going to give a little background on the Board of Review. I'm sure many of you already know about this, but much of what I'm presenting tonight is for the information of the public. The Board of Review is where individuals or companies can appeal their property tax assessment, their property tax taxable value, assessed value, taxable value, and the classification. The classification issue does not come up very often. There are 9 members on the Board of Review. 1 member is appointed from each council member, by each council member. When we meet we break up into groups of 3. There must always be at least 2 present at a group, and only those who hear the actual appeal from the resident can render the decision. You may remember back in early to mid 90s when the sales tax changed from 4% to 6% is when the real change came into effect in how property taxes are, let me say, established or paid. At that time, the sales tax increased, and there were 18 mills that residents were paying, which they no longer pay now. Businesses continue to pay that. We meet 3 times a year in March, July, and December. At the March meeting is when the public can appeal that assessed or taxable value. They also have an opportunity to appeal their appeal for the poverty exemption at that time. They can do that in any of the 3 months. The board is not full-time employees of the city. We meet only about 9 to 12 days out of the year. What was going on at one point in the mid-2000s is that the assessed and taxable value are 2 different things. So over the years from Prop A, as the assessed values were going up on the homes, say 10-15% a year, the taxable value could only go up at a rate of 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever was less. It never reached 5%. So what was happening is there became this large gap between the assessed value and the taxable value. The taxable value is what drove the amount of taxes you paid. Now these levels for several years there was this gap. And what we experienced in the mid-2000s, around the recession, is that the assessed value was dropping, but there was still some inflation in the economy, so the taxable value was going up. And residents were coming in and saying, look, the city is saying my house is worth less money, but they're making me pay more taxes. And, for many, they thought it was unfair, that just wasn't right, because that is what was happening. But by law, it could happen, because there remained some inflation. So what happened in the following years is that assessed value began to drop. And once it equaled the taxable value, the assessed value can never be lower than the taxable. Taxable can never be higher than the assessed. So residents were experiencing a decrease in their property taxes, which for many that was good, and I believe we had fewer appeals. Well, here recently, the city manager, I believe it was, they put on a special assessment for the lighting, and they took the garbage millage off the property taxes and made that a special assessment also. So when people come in to apply for the poverty exemption, it's a dual part qualification. One, they have to qualify based on income, and then they have to qualify based on the amount of taxes they pay. So what we're finding out right now is that people will qualify based on their income, but because the property values have dropped so much, they don't qualify for any tax relief. Now, obviously the values have dropped because of the home value, but more importantly, this special assessment of lights and garbage is taken off, and people have to pay that amount. That's basically not considered. So there's always an amount they have to pay, even if they qualify based on income and the value of their home. Even if they qualify there, they still would have to pay for that garbage assessment. Now, additionally, they need to qualify both on the income and on the property taxes in order to get any relief on their water bill. So because they don't qualify for the one, they're not getting the relief in the water bill. And I believe it's something that needs to be looked at. Additionally, renters do not get any, to my knowledge, any relief, because in order to get the poverty exemption, you need to be the owner of the house, and it needs to be your primary residence. So I think the two most important things that council might be looking at is relief for renters on their water bill, and relief for those who qualify on their income but do not qualify for relief based on the value of their home and the amount of taxes they pay. And just a thing on the appeals, it's important for residents to take time in March to make their appeal, because what that does is it preserves the residents' right to appeal to the state of Michigan. Without making that appeal to the Board of Review, they have no right to appeal to the state. Some residents are hesitant to come in March because maybe they don't have the information that they believe they need to make an appeal, but that's all right. Just make the appeal, and then when you go to the state level, you can then present more information. It kind of starts the whole process over at the state level. So if the homeowner did not have an appraisal, they can bring that in at the state level. If they did not have pictures, they can bring that in at the state level to show maybe the condition of their home. So it's important that residents understand that they can make an appeal even if they're not, let me say, properly prepared with all the information. So that's, I think that's where we're at. The big change, again, is the decrease in value in the homes, which prevent homeowners getting any relief, even though they qualify based on the income. And if you have any questions, I'll take them.
Yeah, I just want you to, I'll let you get to questions in a second. But just clarify again for everybody. At the beginning, you mentioned you could raise it 5% or equal to the rate of inflation. Actually, you can only raise it the rate of inflation, and it's capped at 5%. Is that correct? I mean, the city can't raise the taxable value more than the rate of inflation, and if the rate of inflation goes above 5%, it's capped at 5%. Is that correct?
Right, no, right.
Okay, I just
No
want to
greater
make
than 5%.
everybody aware of that, because the city can't arbitrarily raise your taxable value 5%. The 5% is a cap, and it's only based on the rate of inflation. And if the rate of inflation goes above 5%, that's when it's capped at 5%. So I just want to make that clear to everybody, because when you first made that comment, I was kind of confused if you were talking about the city could raise it 5% or equal to the rate of inflation, but that's not the case, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, if the inflation rate is 3%, then it can only go up 3%.
And if the rate of inflation is 7%, it can only go up to 5%.
Yep.
Thank you.
And that is, much of this is set by state law, though the council does have some discretion as to the amount of money that one is allowed to make as far as income
Right.
towards the poverty exemption.
Right, okay. Now I'm going to entertain questions from my colleagues and try to keep it specific to the Board of Review.
Yeah, I am. First of all, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Del Maroney, either one can answer the question. I'm looking for the origin of how this special order got here. I got a whole lot of respect for Mr. Del Maroney. I understand the chairperson of the review board, but I'm always curious to know who puts these special orders on here and as it relates where.
I can answer that for you, Mr. Mays.
And then I want to
I had the same question. It's my understanding, and Mr. Del Maroney can correct me if I'm wrong. He requested it through the administration, talked to Ms. Murphy, and then they allowed the clerk to put it on the agenda. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, sir.
Well, God bless you, Mr. Del Maroney, and I'm glad that that procedure was granted, and we'll continue to watch that special order procedure. Mr. Del Maroney, my specific concern to you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Del Maroney, is that poverty exemption as it relates to water. We've got some major problems in this community as it relates to water. And I want you to chime in for the public. I know some of the answers. I just want to hear what you say, because we just left a legislative committee. And poverty and water and all of those exemptions based on what's going on in this community is one of the greatest concerns to me. And I'm here to tell you, I see Miss McClinton in the audience, and Miss Claire McClinton gave me a model where we're looking at ordinances and changes that might say a water bill can't exceed 3% of the income. There's been some in-depth studies on this. And you know, and I know Rosa Murphy is talking about a demonstration in front of City Hall this Friday. I've seen Mr. Councilman Davis do 3. I've done 1, and it's going to be 1 this Friday. I hope Ms. Murphy has a bigger crowd than anybody, but that poverty exemption and our ability to change the law and give it to more people. I want you to tell the community a little more about that poverty exemption for water, and speak about that poverty exemption as it relates to your knowledge of any ability under regular government. I'm not talking about this emergency manager stuff. I don't believe in it. I don't like it. I'm ready for it to go away, and we're going to fight. But chime in, Mr. Del Maroney on the council's ability to affect those rules and ordinance, if it has that ability from your knowledge, and should that be a number one item or number two, or should it go to the legislative committee? Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Mays. Mr.
Well, I'm not sure whether it should go to the legislative committee or not. I mean, that would be council's workings. I believe, though, the program to offer some relief to those who qualify under the poverty exemption guidelines for water are, for sake of argument, is intended, a good intention, but because those property values have dropped so much, the intent to give relief to people, it's not where it should be or maybe needs to be, because they still can't afford the water, but they don't qualify for any relief because of the value of their home. And again, if they're a renter, from my understanding, there's no relief for them on the water bill whatsoever. There's no means, there's no channel to make application. How the relief for the water bill came about, I could be mistaken, but I believe it might have come through council about 2 years ago. So the ability to change it, financial manager on the side, I would think go through council. It's kind of like the state sets guidelines as to the amount of income that a household can make in order to get relief, but council can go beyond that. And I think council has already gone beyond that through their actions some time ago. I mean, preceding me being on the board, I think the state guidelines are, for an individual person, one person, it's $20,000, which is what Flint City Council has determined. The state of Michigan only allows a lesser amount, but at the same time, they allow council to make that adjustment.
Can I just kind of follow up real quick, Councilman Mays, just to kind of help clarify this? I've been involved a little bit with this. The problem for the poverty exemption, we've gone and we've reduced the amount of income level that we can. It's my understanding that the problem comes from the state statute that allows for the formula of taxable value that then makes somebody qualify. So as our state legislators look at that taxable value in Proposal A, because it's all tied to Proposal A, would then help us in our community, because we've already gone above and beyond the fact for income. We've lowered the income to I believe about the allowable by state law that we can. We've dropped that level that low. Where we can't go beyond is the state law for the taxable value, because that's a part of Proposal A. Am I correct?
I don't know I don't know how
Because there's a formula that they use to
there is.
calculate between income and taxable value, and the state statute sets that formula based on taxable value.
Correct. So we're not necessarily to correct you, but we're beyond the limit of what the state allows. I'm not sure what the number is, but let's say, for instance, the state allows $18,000 for income. City of Flint says 20 is allowable.
That's great,
See,
Councilman.
Mr.
You're saying
So-
we increase it to the above the minimum of.
Oh, okay,
poverty.
okay. I thought
So-
we were at the state level. You're saying we're not.
Correct. We've
We're
been
higher.
told we're
Okay.
higher.
Mr.
So what
Chair.
happens, if I can for a minute?
If
I don't
I
wanna
may,
get into too much
yeah,
discussion,
no, I don't
Councilman
want to
Mays. I don't
really,
mean to take away
I don't
from
want to
you.
really get into
Move this
discussion. Under the Public Works Committee that Ms. Popular chairs, we just asked for all of those type ordinances to come before her committee. So by Mr. Del Maroney being here and mentioning the poverty exemption, I just was trying to let the public and the media know that that stuff has been requested to all come to Ms. Popular's committee, and we're fixing to try to review and shape those ordinances in committee. And believe me, we can't do that, and I look forward to not doing that yesterday. Mr. Del Maroney, I hope you'll continue to attend those committee meetings where we've requested all of that ordinance, but this thing has got to turn more from talk to a reshaping of water ordinances as it relates to these things. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate it, and that was my purpose for doing it. I knew some of the answers, but I wanted the public to hear some of that and know that we've requested everybody to look at that in Public Works Committee, and I anticipate some of it will go to Mr. Neely's committee in legislative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Mays. Councilwoman Poplar, do you have anything? Councilman Nolan? Councilman Freeman?
No.
Councilman Montois Davis? Councilman Neely?
Yes, just to clarify, for the public, and Chris, you can assist me with this because you are the chairperson of that board. The city council does have the ability, pursuant to ordinance, to raise the threshold for what we consider poverty in our community. The cocktail for success as it relates to reduction of property value or property taxable value that we're going to charge those people who qualify, and then the emergency manager with the reduction in the service fee for water, we can provide a successful recipe to help residents out in this time. So my recommendation would be through you, Mr. President, Councilwoman Poplar, is to entertain in her committee of public works to increase the level of what that poverty exemption would be, because it starts out at the level of $20,000 for one in a household, and it goes up $3,000 in increments for every additional person in the household. So say if you have two people in your household, $23,000, you could meet the standard for having a poverty tax exemption, which means also the $58.13 that you get assessed for water on residential could be also reduced and or waived, and that could mean a great deal to a family that's in desperate need. But also, I believe, is it the street lighting assessment also, Mr. Darrell Maloney?
Yes, that streetlight assessment plays a role.
Right, the $74 streetlight assessment also will be impacted as that relates to that. So there's three ways for residents to save, but one of the biggest issues that I've had in my ward, Mr. Del Maloney, and I'm not for sure about my other colleagues, is residents to come to apply for the poverty tax exemption because it's an unknown benefit to most residents. And so I think we have to do a better job in letting people know that it's available for help, and we get them here and we see if they qualify. And I think it's also an exemption for people with medical expenses to a certain degree, right, Mr. Del Maloney?
Well, the medical expense comes into play, but not an exemption for that specifically. There is an exemption for veterans who are basically honorably discharged from the military, who have a disability, and the VA makes modifications on their house, maybe a ramp that goes in, or if shelving has to be lowered or countertops have to be lowered, that they would then get a 100% exemption, pay no property taxes whatsoever, and that benefit would accrue to their surviving spouse when the veteran passes away, provided the spouse does not remarry.
So there's measurable things that we can use for the benefit of residents and veterans alike in this community to help them, but I just don't think enough people come through that. But we can actually assist by actually increasing the threshold for poverty in our community. I just wanted to say that, and I thank you for the great work that you and your colleagues do there, Mr. Del Maloney, and please continue to do so. But if you have your calendar in front of you with the dates, because it has to be, when residents apply for the poverty tax exemption, it's only open, there's only 2 windows a year, or is it?
For the poverty exemption, I believe they can do it at all 3. They'll be able to, if they haven't done it yet for this year, they'll be able to do it at the December board of review. They can do it in person, schedule an appointment, or simply make the application, turn it into the city assessor's office. We just met in July, and we had also met in March. March is the only time that the assessment for taxable value and assessed value can be heard.
Okay. And I think we need to make sure that the public is aware of it. Maybe we need to send a referral down to the IT people to place that on the city's website to advertise the dates of those board reviews.
Applications, yeah.
Right, and application. Maybe even they should even download the application online, where they don't have to make the trip down to City Hall.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Naylor. Councilperson Galloway? No. Councilperson Van Buren?
Yes, I'd like to support what Councilman Neely was saying. I think the website would be an excellent area for people to get that information. Also, the certain areas or opportunities that people could benefit from the poverty exemption that Councilman Neely was stating. I don't know if we have any type of printed information with that outline like that. I think it would help for the residents to understand kind of what's available to them or what the process is, and like you mentioned, the dates. I know I checked into it over a year ago, and my mother did not qualify only because she had one of my sisters listed on the property. The person did not live there, but it was required that that person turned in also her income, and that probably would knock my mother not eligible to go through that process, so my mother declined to even go through it, because the only reason my sister was placed on there was in the death of my mother. She's 88 years old. That it'd be easier for the family to have access to the property without going through a lot of court action or probate or whatever. So I think that's not making it available to a certain amount of people that could really benefit from it, because sometimes I don't think it's being open as it should be to a lot of people that are in need of that help. And that somehow that needs to be either updated or the process a little simplified. But I do encourage, if there's a way to get some of this in some type of written material that either we could have access to and hand out to our constituents through meetings and so forth, and to have a little bit easier understanding of the process. I think this would be, it's easily overlooked, but there would be a big benefit once people are able to make qualifications for that.
If I may, and those are, that's one crack that people fall through, and it's, it's not just who lives in the house and who they make, but whose name is that home in. The next meeting for the Board of Review is December 9th. That information about how to appeal and the information needed is available at the City Assessor's Office on the second floor. They have actual applications, and in the application it spells out the income guidelines, veterans, what their requirements are to qualify for the veterans benefit. So it's available in that sense. I don't know if it's online or not, but that's a good idea if it were online. The one other thing is something called the principal resident exemption, and it's important for home buyers when they purchase a home to make application for this. It's not done automatically. They have to take it upon themselves to do it. And when they do this, then their principal residence, on their principal residence, they do not have to pay the 18 mills, okay? So if they don't make application, they're paying the 18 mills on their property in addition to their regular taxes. So it's very important that they make application for that. If for some reason they forget, they can make that application for the current year and go back 3 years, and it's retroactive, so they'll get a refund. And every year, I would say we get probably hundreds of different applications for one or more years where people just did not know to do it, or somehow it didn't happen. So it's better known as the PRE. It's called the Personal Residence Exemption.
Okay. Just, again, I want to thank you, Chris. I want to thank Otis Lovejoy, who's in the audience this evening, who's on the Board of Review, and Councilperson Galloway and Councilman Mays. Inez Brown and I met with the emergency manager to go over a couple of things. One was this, making sure that everybody had a copy of the business licenses and stuff. I mentioned to him that there were 2 vacancies on the Board of Review, and that he needed to either allow us to make those approvals, or he needed to make those approvals. He made and approval for Councilperson Davis, and got a person appointed to the Fifth Ward. So I just want you guys to know that, you know, I mentioned it to the emergency manager today.
What was the other ward vacancy?
Ms. Brown, I'm sorry?
What other ward had a
There's
vacancy?
only two to my knowledge, just the 7th Ward and the 1st Ward now.
So do I
That, to
make,
my knowledge, that's the vacancies, based on dialogue that I've had with my colleagues.
Was Mr. Davis able to make your recommendation?
I don't know, he talked to the emergency manager, I
I ended
understand.
up getting Lynn Wainwright. Yeah, she asked and I spoke and they allowed her to go on the board of review. Lynn Wainwright used to be on the board of review at once upon a time. So I went on and chose her again because she asked me, could I make that referral for her, and I did.
Mr. President, if I may, how long did it take since from the time that you made the referral that you find out that that appointment that you recommended was approved?
About a month or
2 or
so.
3
About a month or
months,
so.
yeah.
About a month.
Okay, I've had referral for the zoning board in the 1st Ward in for going on 2 months. And I know that's a different thing, but I'll make a referral for the board of review in the 1st Ward if it's open, and we'll see what happens. Maybe Mr. Del Maroney or somebody will talk, and we'll see who used to be there and what's going on, and I'd appreciate your counsel.
And Eric, I may have misspoke, because what I was talking about appointments to boards and commissions, and I specifically knew that there was a vacancy in the 7th Ward. The person that represented the 7th Ward passed.
Passed away, right.
And for some reason, you know, I wasn't sure if yours was Board of Review or Planning Commission, so I,
Zoning board and planning,
What-
we'll check it
Yeah,
out, but
but
I
I
get
just-
yeah, I appreciate it.
for you guys, I just want you to know that I mentioned to the emergency manager today that there were vacancies and that they needed to be filled, so.
One way or another.
so does that mean I can make an appointment, or at least submit it to him, and then he can decide?
You're right.
Okay.
And I know Councilman Mays has submitted a name, at least Councilman Mays indicated that he had submitted a name, but I don't remember who.
In
that
the
was.
zoning board of
Okay.
appeals. Hey, Mr. President, can we make a referral to get a list of any vacancies and appointments that would be,
Yeah, the
needed
clerk's
to
office
be
has
filled
those. Yep, Madam
in
Clerk
each
has
of our
them. She
wards?
keeps
Yeah,
record
be-
of them.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
So you don't have to make a referral, I think you can just ask.
All right, thank you.
Okay? All right,
President,
thank you, Mr.
President.
Thank you.
Del Maroney. I'm sorry?
Yes, I still have a vacancy on the Zoning Board of Appeals since June, and I have a copy of the letter that I submitted to the emergency manager that I was going to give to you today. 'Cause
Okay.
I know you were asking if we had
Yeah,
some
and
openings.
I just wanted you to know that when I met, I told them that there were vacancies and that we needed to get them filled.
Yeah,
I didn't mention names. You know, that's not up to me to tell them who to appoint. You guys, we all make our own recommendations, and I just wanted you to know, in our conversations before we left, I indicated to him that there were some vacancies and that they needed to be filled.
And some of them already have recommendations made, so we'll see what happens. And some
Okay.
of them is over a month or
Well,
two
should
old.
I,
right,
should
hold
I
on just one second.
resubmit, or should I just,
If you've submitted the name, they have them,
okay,
okay? I mean, they should have them.
okay.
All right? If not, I mean, if you don't think they do, I mean, it only takes a few minutes, give them to the clerk, and we'll resubmit, have them resubmit the name to them for you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. President, I would suggest that you give a call to the emergency manager too, and say, hey, I submitted this name, you know, a while ago, what's going on, or what's the status with them?
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Davis, is that what you did? That you talked directly with the emergency manager or just Ms. Murphy
I submitted a letter
with the name?
with the name, yes, sir.
Yeah, we've done that.
Okay? All right, thank you. All right, let's move on. And thank you all, and thank you, Chris, again, for the update. I think that's very important.
Mr. Chairman, thanks for speaking on our behalf as it relates to appointments. I didn't know you had did that. That's something we've been talking about, and so I appreciate you, and keep us updated if you hear something one way or the other. I appreciate that.
Well, hopefully, the communications now should go directly to those that have requested the appointment. Okay, are there any additional petitions or unofficial communications, Madam Clerk?
No, Mr. President.
Are there any communications from other city officials, Madam Clerk?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Mr. President, there was one communication to city officials.
I'm sorry, Councilman?
Sorry, it was a communication, it was a press release about the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation downtown. It was the amount of $150,000 grant from this Charles Stewart Mott Foundation to help out with public safety and traffic problems. I do have a question about that. I don't know if this is appropriate time to ask, or...
Yeah, did you wait
Yeah,
for
I-
public comment? Because we have no input to that. I mean, you know, we didn't have anything to do with that.
I know, but what I witnessed downtown was that the public safety and traffic engineering was used for a private party on the 500 block of downtown that was gated off, and regular pedestrians were not allowed to enter that area unless they paid a fee of $10.
Oh, I wasn't aware of that, so.
Yeah, and
Okay.
it was a terrible thing to witness, and I just wanted to make a brief comment about that because I know you
Okay.
didn't know anything about it, and many of my colleagues didn't know anything about it, but in previous years, if any block or any part of the city was partitioned off for a private party or anything like that, it had to be approved by this body. That-
Can we wait till the end and talk about it? I mean, I mean, you know, I think,
I understand, I just didn't want to be
Yeah,
indicted
I
for
understand.
people thinking that we had a part in that.
right, and I'm glad you raised that. Okay. Committee reports, council committee reports. First, public safety. Councilperson Van Buren, I apologize, I couldn't be at a couple of the committees this last week, but do you have a report?
Yes, our meeting was held last Thursday, August 21st, and from the fire department, they're still manning 3 stations each day. They are down from 148 fires from last year, and they feel one of the biggest help is that they've been receiving information from the public. Last week, and I think you may have seen the article in the paper, a juvenile was caught as a group of juveniles involved in fires around the 2500 block of Concord. This juvenile was caught by Chief Cox, and they're also looking into it further regarding the other juveniles. They're also taking job applications for firefighter and trainees and EMTs. The police department currently has 109 sworn officers. They're back to the bricks the chief said was most peaceful that they ever had for the years that they've been there. They did have an arrest of 19 adults and 16 juveniles that were detained due to the enforcement of the special event curfew. They will also have a new addition to the police department, a K-9, a shepherd named Ito, and this dog will be used for explosive and tracking. The chief is also looking at the exploration of having part-time officers, and he is in communication working with the unions. Our next public safety meeting will be September 18th. That is my report.
Thank you, Councilperson Van Buren. Our next committee report on public safety, on finance, Councilman Freeman, I think that meeting was postponed.
Yeah, there's nothing to report. We did not meet in August. There was no actionable items that were brought forward to us, so I didn't see the need to meet. We will be meeting again starting in September, where we'll begin our quarterly review of both the budget and then also our strategic plan and whether or not we're meeting those benchmarks that were set within that plan for the first quarter. So,
Yeah.
next September, but nothing to report for August.
All right, Legislative Committee, Councilman Neely.
Yes, we had our legislative committee meeting today. We went through several different discussion items, but the action item that we did will move to the floor for the September agenda is all of the combined business licensing changes or recommendations, and I encourage all of my colleagues, once, you don't have to wait till September to start reviewing this material. There will be a 60-day window at that particular point once it's on our agenda. to make any recommendations to the modification of these new business licensing recommendations that was provided to us via the emergency manager from the legal department and planning and development. So everybody should have this information in their boxes, or?
No, I have not gotten that information.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
Madam Clerk?
The document was passed out at the legislative meeting, I guess about 4 or 5 months ago. And with the action that was that took place today in the committee meeting, what we will do is give copies to all council members so that they will have an opportunity to review the entire document. So by next Tuesday, each council person will receive the document.
Mr. President, as we move forward, and I know that these committees are not committees of the whole, but when there's agenda or there's items in that, can we make sure that all of council gets that information? Because I don't get it for every committee, and that, you don't get it either? Okay, yeah, I've not seen any of that information
That's kind of
that we've supposedly had since February. So as we move forward, can we make sure that we get that information?
We will certainly do that in the future, Mr. Freeman, but in this particular case, it was designated specifically for that particular committee. And because it's a voluminous package, we did not have time to do it for this meeting today, but by Tuesday, you will have copies.
But if we've had it since February,
But
Seems like
again,
we
at
should have
that
had
time, it
time.
was designated for that particular committee.
what, okay.
So only the committee members, the 3 legislative committee members had this since February?
No.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
okay.
Go ahead.
I didn't understand that
Yeah.
in the legislation when Attorney
if-
Bay kept saying since February, I'm like, oh my God. Okay, no problem.
Yeah, and that's why I was talking like that, Councilwoman Galloway. I've been reviewing it since February, so it's really some package to review.
We'll make sure that everybody gets them now that we've set the time frame. So,
Well, everybody will have that package sometime in the latter part of this week for sure, and then by Tuesday of this week, you'll have this package, and at that time, I would ask and request that we all take a look at it. It is a pretty big, robust package to review it because it's going to impact the whole city moving forward. I have sent a referral down, and it will go down for the emergency manager to allow us additional meetings of legislative so we can actually talk about the recommendations moving forward, because there will be a time limit on this, and we do want to make sure our input is felt in this package before it's placed before the public business owners inside the city of Flint. We had 2 discussion items that we will move to the September agenda. Beyond that, I think we're moving forward.
we have one ordinance that for the fire code,
Yes,
that's before us this evening, the update of the fire code.
right.
You want to mention that?
I think this is the second time I missed it. I missed it in committee, and this is the second time I looked over. Thank you, Council President. We do have an item before us today. It's a matter of taking a look at it. It's for fire code throughout the city of Flint for businesses. We did have a lieutenant from the fire department in to discuss it in committee. The recommendation from that lieutenant was to move forward with that recommendation. The legislative committee then moved it to the body for your consumption and review to do with it as we will tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Neely. Our next committee report is Planning and Development. Councilman Davis.
Councilman Nolan stood in my stead on that day. I had a family emergency, so I think he will be able to expound on what went on that day. I wasn't there.
We had a couple of discussions with Megan around the different funds that we have here. Section 108 dollars. We talked a little bit about that. We talked about the economic development dollars, the committee that Councilman Neely sits on. That-
EDC.
EDC. We talked about that, and we talked about getting an actual list of everybody. Oh, she did. She passed out a list of of the funds that's out. And who owes, who has not paid, and what we're gonna be doing moving forward. So that was the gist of it. Each person that was there got a copy of that, and I'm hoping that you guys got a chance to review it. And she was supposed to send a digital copy so that each one of the council members were supposed to have it. So I'm hoping that we've got it, because I think we're supposed to send it by last Tuesday. And that was the gist of that meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Nolan. Our last report, Councilperson Poplar on the Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson, Mr. President. Okay, the Public Works Committee, we met Tuesday, August the 19th, and it was Mr. Howard Croft, Ms. Kay Mohammed, and I can't think of his name, Duffy, Mr. Duffy Johnson. They discussed, first of all, Chevy Commons, which they have a strategic plan to make Chevy Commons a park that will be walkable, sittable, runnable for the whole community of the city of Flint. And they talked about the compost status and grant status of Chevy Commons. So it is a plan that's in works in a plan. We talked about the new incinerator, and there is a timeline for completion on that, and a potential savings with this new incinerator. One of the biggest things I think we talked about that probably will concern the council and the city, the fall leaf pickup. And there will be a PR campaign development to make sure that the constituents know what's going on, the city workers will know what's going on, council people will know what's going on, to give their constituents the correct way to do their fall leaf pickup. We discussed bags being available for the citizens of the city of Flint, which can go through the many police stations and also Salem Housing. They can be contacted for leaf bags, and that program will have a rollout later on so everybody will know what's going on with the fall leaf pickup, the start and the ending of it. Then we had updates on the street tree management. We had an update on Glen Acres water status, and we all know now that Glen Acres is back on, but my question was to Howard, and he's supposed to get back with us. When the people were evicted because of the water, how many people left not knowing that their water was going to be cut back on? So we're waiting on that information. And I think they kind of jumped the gun a little bit because it wasn't the people's fault. It was the management's fault. The people were paying their rent. And so I just want to know how many people left not knowing that their water was going to be cut back on because someone finally put down $20,000 they had to cut. Cut back on. And then also we discussed snow plowing, and that will be a program that will be rolled out. I believe they're going to kind of break it up in 4 quadrants of the city where there'll be trucks all the time at one point in time doing the snow plowing instead of 10 trucks over in one part of the city and no trucks over in another part. They want to make sure that the whole city of Flint has trucks going at the same time for snow plowing. So we'll get further update on that also in our next Public Works Committee meeting, and that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all very much for your reports. There are no appointments this evening, no licenses, no bonds, no resolutions. Just to the resolution fact, I also, when Ms. Brown and I met with the emergency manager, and just for my colleagues that want to know why I meet with them, he requests a meeting with myself and Ms. Brown and the vice president prior to the council meeting for us to kind of go over to the agenda. So at that meeting today, I mentioned to him that he needed to start getting resolutions to the committees so that the committees could review them, and then they could be on our agenda so that we could start to act on some resolutions. So how do I put it, Inez? He said that he would review my request, right? That's what he said. So just so you guys know that I'm pushing to get more things on our agenda for us to be able to act on. Liquor licenses, there are none. Ordinances, we have a number of ordinances, and then Councilman Mays, I'll come back to you, okay?
Okay,
Is that all right?
that's all right.
Ordinances, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have the one add-on ordinance that deals with the International Fire Code. So, Councilman Neely, you're the chair. Councilman Mays, either one of you want to make a motion on these ordinances? You want to do them one at a time, or you want to do all of them at once? It's up to you guys.
Well, I would like to have had our city attorney here to just give a brief description for the public.
You know, I'll walk down and get him, and in the meantime, the one ordinance deals with zoning and special regulated use, and we have Sherry Pierce here.
Okay.
If Sherry wants to quickly address the zoning ordinance.
Prior to her, if I may, Mr. President, that special use ordinance, I think they're going to find out is connected with the medical marijuana provision, because that special use ordinance is going to be regulated use. If I'm not mistaken, she can correct me, but I want to see if she'll address kind of if they are connected, talk about them in that way. Because that, if I'm not mistaken, that special regulated use ordinance is going to include, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that medical marijuana aspect of the special use.
Here it comes. Okay. He's here.
There he
I mean,
comes.
and I'm sorry, I'm going to jump in, but if there's an add-on, why weren't these brought to us for now? Because not all of us were at legislative.
And I understand that. It's
Right.
Well, let me just, Councilman Neely, can I
Yes, go ahead,
explain?
please.
Do you
Yes.
mind?
Yes.
The International Fire Code is something that is presented and updated every year.
Okay.
We had a representative from the fire department, and again, this ordinance is just for first reading, moves us to the next level of code regulations that deal with public safety. And it was the committee's recommendation that why we go through this process, because it deals with public safety, that we, and I believe our last updated version was 2006, I believe.
Correct,
Is that correct?
correct.
And the new code is now 2015. So our ordinance is out of date with the recommendation of the International Firefighters Code and Commission. So we felt that it was important that it's a couple paragraph changes to the ordinance, that we move it for first reading tonight, and then all council members and the public will have the opportunity to comment on it in the September council meeting.
Mr. President, while
Councilman Mays, go
While
ahead.
Mr. Freeman digests that, I kind of smile because, you know, as I watch the chairpersons give their report, I've noticed from being in attendance at the various committee meetings, along with, I noticed Mrs. Councilwoman Galloway seemed to be in attendance. We pick up a lot by attending a lot of those different meetings, and so I kind of smile at Councilman Freeman because as we get ready to transition back, I hope that you will mention, and I hope it become a thing, that each of these committees, we used to do well as a council when we worked as a committee of the whole. And so every chairperson had 8 other people there. And so as I see it moving, I appreciate it. And I believe not only for Councilman Freeman should we talk about the details of it, but more importantly for the public. When we deal with such ordinances and first readings, and I know it'll be public hearings and it'll be opportunities for second readings, but just as me, my colleagues, Councilman Freeman, I would appreciate the type of communications that you just gave for colleagues, and you did it in that one. I'm so glad that the public can understand what we're doing as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Mays. Councilman Neely, you want to interact with the attorney or Sherry Pierce on the ordinances that are before us?
Yeah, just Peter, just briefly, the ordinances before us tonight, if you just give a brief overview, a snapshot for the residents and those who's going to be in the viewing audience, what these ordinances are and what we're going to be voting on tonight.
Yeah, I apologize for my absence. I had a family matter that I had to attend to. The first 2 ordinances, items number 140406.1 and 140408, concern an amendment to the fireworks ordinance and allow the city to regulate in part the use of fireworks. As you may know, the state of Michigan adopted a statute that largely occupies the field and regulates the sale and use of fireworks. Historically, municipalities were able to regulate fireworks more broadly than they currently are, and so we've amended our ordinance to remove those sections that are inconsistent with state law, but also it continues to regulate when fireworks may be discharged.
Mr. Chairman, would it be proper to move 41406.1 and 140408 for first reading?
I'll recognize that motion if there's support. It's been moved and supported. Discussion on it? Madam Clerk just stepped out. Janelle, can you do roll for me? Here's the mic.
Mr. Mays?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Yes.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman? Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Ms. Galloway?
Yes.
Ms. Van Buren?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes. Thank you, Janelle.
The next ordinance, proposed amendment is item number 140409. And this is really to recommend that the article dealing with outdoor pay telephones simply be eliminated. This came up because as we were reviewing ordinances, the numbering was out of sequence. This had actually been used twice. But in reviewing it, it was our recommendation that there's no need to regulate outdoor payphones. They're really not used that much with the advent of cell phones. And so that's the why this particular ordinance was proposed, just to eliminate it.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilman Mays?
I would move 140409 for first reading.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Further discussion? Roll, Madam Clerk.
That's only one ordinance that he's moving?
that one, 140409. It's to move the first reading.
Mr. Nolden?
No, oh, yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Should have started with Jackie. Councilwoman Poppins should have first.
Just one second, we get it.
Well, Janelle didn't start with Jackie, that's why.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
Ms.
why I
Poplar?
see.
Yes.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Ms. Galloway?
Yes?
Ms. Van Buren?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Mays?
Yes.
The vote is 9 yes, 0 no to move for first reading, 140409.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. 140500.
This is the medical marijuana ordinance. It would regulate medical marijuana provisioning centers, and it's a companion ordinance is 140501, which is an amendment of the zoning special regulated use chapter, and Sherry Pierce can address the specific designated zoning areas. The zoning amendment does include, it identifies those dispensaries that were in operation prior to the city's moratorium. Any dispensary that is not listed, and that's listed in a footnote to that amendment, any dispensaries that started operations after the city's moratorium are subject to all provisions of the zoning regulations, and all dispensaries are subject to the ordinance regulating provisioning centers. So even those that are grandfathered in would be subject to the regulations, for example, that employees be licensed, and that, for example, that the police would have the right to enter the premises at any time during hours of operation without a warrant.
Mr. President,
Councilman Mays?
I would move 140500 and 140501 for first reading.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Discussion?
Just a
Yes.
Hold on. Councilman Neely?
Yeah, just to Peter, so people can have a clear understanding. These ordinance changes will be for all medical marijuana dispensaries in total, even the ones that's been previously grandfathered, correct?
That's correct.
Just, I wanted to make that clear for them, making sure that we didn't have two different groups.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Mays?
Yeah, Mr. President, I've moved those two medical marijuana companion ordinances for first reading. I've also want the public to know that I've asked that they go back and we talk a little more in committee. I know they had been at first reading before, correct?
That's correct.
And then there was some amendments and changes in law, and then they went back and started over, and now they're back at first reading again in a different form. Whenever things change, they say substantially or to some extent, however they describe it, then they start over from first reading. So I do move this for first reading, and I do understand that it's a lot of people watching, and I would like for Sherry Pierce to shed light on it if she may during this discussion period. Mr. Kincaid, not so much for my benefit. I know what some of the details of it is, and I know what some of my concerns are after first reading and things I'll talk about in between first and second reading. But I would, because her name has came up, she's been involved with the Planning Commission and she know it. I know she don't talk as much as I do, but if it's something that she would like to chime in on at this time, or I would like for anybody to really do a little bit of discussion. I see Councilwoman Galloway, but this medical marijuana thing is happening all across the state, and I believe that we're behind by not putting something in place because, you know, we've kept people out with this moratorium. And I believe that I want to take a closer look at that list of people who have been grandfather claused in, and I think I've made, if I haven't made the referral, I'll make it. I need a detailed list of that history, and I'll kind of acquiesce and work a little behind the scenes and hope we're almost there. But I'm going to be quiet for Councilwoman Galloway and or Sherry Pierce or anybody else who is trying to catch up as to what we've been looking at so far.
Thank you, Councilman Mays. Before I call on Sherry Pierce, if she wants to address the zoning portion of it, Councilperson Galloway.
I did speak with Attorney Bade and share that I would like to talk more, maybe one-on-one, but there are some concerns that I have. I don't know a lot about the ordinance, but some of my concerns are what are the safeguards to ensure that abuse is not happening. I know that there's a clause or it's written in the ordinance that we can go on the property at any time. I just wonder, do we have the manpower and or the passion to do so? And I only say that because personally, I went into one on Dort Highway. I think it's in your ward, Scott. And the first thing that alarmed me is this is a marijuana dispensary, and I don't have a problem with that. I know that people need it for illnesses and things like that. My question is, if it's such a beneficial thing, why aren't some of the hospitals taking it up? But in pulling up to this dispensary, on the window, it has a sign saying candy and water for sale. To me, that's inappropriate. Because if you've got children that are interested in candy and water, why should you be selling that in a marijuana dispensary? So as soon as you walk in, of course, because marijuana is so strong, it's just everywhere. And so it alarmed me that they would be advertising that type of solicitation for people that could be underage that would be interested in buying that. And then, of course, because, you know, this is what they do, I mean, everything you can think of to do marijuana, and I understand the concept. But then the two people that were there didn't appear to be professionals to me. And I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor, but they look like somebody that I would have ran into in my community that may have now been in a position to implement the marijuana supply. And it didn't work for me. And they didn't care. The young lady was sitting on the couch just as matter-of-factly, and it didn't say professionalism to me. And I think that when you are in a position in which you are called to implement such a substance that has been abused in our communities, I think that there should be some safeguards. And it didn't speak safeguard. And of course, this is only one. But the young man was clear. I asked him, what are your qualifications to do this? And the young lady said, well, you know, I went to social work and this was a good thing. And I said to him, I said, because, you know, I've had a family. People have abused this. And the young man said, like you, I've had that. And this has brought me to a place where I can help people. That didn't work for me. And I just want to make sure that as a city, I want to know how beneficial is this really for us. And is it going to set us back? Because we still have to understand the population that we service. And so I just wanted that to be on the record. I do have some questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilperson Galloway. Sherry, you want to talk about, just real quick, update us on the Planning Commission and what they did and the zoning for dispensaries?
Sure.
Thank you.
The Planning Commission met on August 12th, and they recommended approval to this body to amend the ordinance to include marijuana provisioning centers or dispensaries as a special regulated use in the zoning ordinance. That would mean part of the process would be an applicant would make an application to the Planning Commission, go before a public hearing, and they would have to meet the qualifications of a locational qualifications to start a business with quite, well, let me say it, as a Group E, they would call it special regulated use. Therefore, they would need to, the ordinance states that they would have to be not within 1,000 feet of a K through 12 school, a park, a church, or another E, medical marijuana dispensary business. Also, there could not be more than 4 E, or as they say, A, Group A, adult entertainment uses within 2,000 feet of this proposed business. It would also have to be within a commercial or an industrial district, which currently would be D2, D3, D6, E, F, or G. They eliminated the D4 or D5 zoning district, which is basically your downtown and central business district, just right outside of downtown. So that would be the process for a special regulated use for the zoning portion of it. I believe that would be their number one step to open up a business, would be to find a location, a proper location, and that would meet these qualifications, and then at that point it would come to the licensing portion of it. Then that process would be to apply for the license, to have a criminal background checks, building inspections, fire marshal, licensing for the location, for also the caregivers, each caregiver, the employees. There's a few more details in the ordinance that they would have to go through for the licensing. And we would have to, go through that process and get a checklist. It's pretty extensive.
Okay.
Mr.
let
Chairman.
me, are you through, Sherry?
Yeah.
Okay, the attorney wants to make a couple more points, and then I'm going to come back to Councilperson Galloway. Then I'll come back to you, Councilman Mays, if you have a question.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight a couple points in the ordinance and sort of to speak to Councilman May's comments. We're currently really not regulating dispensaries, so there's a little bit of a Wild West feel to things. Our ordinance this is a very heavily regulated field under our ordinance, so this is a step in the direction of regulation. And the first step for dispensary under the ordinance is a $5,000 fee, annual fee, that would go to pay for the cost of enforcement and having our officers time to go in and make sure every employee must also be licensed. People with a felony conviction for drug-related offenses are not permitted to work in a dispensary. The zoning regulations are extremely narrow. There's not very many places in the city that dispensaries are authorized. And as mentioned, our police officers will have total freedom to enter and inspect the premises. People under 18 years old are not permitted on premises unless they possess a valid patient card and are accompanied by a parent or guardian. So, in my view, this ordinance goes to great lengths to regulate this field. It also restricts the hours of operation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilperson Galloway, do you have anything else? Sherry?
Sherry, what was that about, they could be 2,000 square feet from adult, what was that?
Adult entertainment uses?
And how long, that's the new ordinance, it wasn't, the new zoning, it wasn't in place before. And the reason why I'm asking is because, and I don't know how far 2,000 is, but this dispensary is, I don't know what 2,000, but it's right by Little Darlings and Deja Vu. And
Well,
so-
there would be a total, no more than 4, within 2,000 square foot radius
Oh, okay.
So of a combination of adult entertainment uses and medical marijuana business.
And was that something that you guys came up with, or where did that come from?
Well, currently there is, in the ordinance for a special regulated use for an adult entertainment, they use 2,000, you can't have with more than 4 adult entertainment within 2,000 square foot radius. So it's kind of mimics that, the adult
You said
entertainment.
that's on the state level, you said?
No, our city ordinance.
Our current city ordinance?
Correct.
Okay.
As a special regulated use, regulating adult entertainment.
And I think that, and the reason why that's very interesting to me, and I'd like to know where the origin of that is, because anytime that you look at some of the research on rape, things of that nature, substance abuse can be tied into it. So the fact that someone recognized that there should be a boundary set means that there was something in someone's mind to say we need to kind of safeguard this. So I'd like to maybe visit that. And then Attorney Bay, you were saying that there's a $5,000 fee and that all of the employees have to be regulated. And I know that on the state level, they've, pushed this through, but I was under the impression, and I could be wrong if you can correct me, that legislation on the state level wasn't saying whether a city should or should not. It wasn't dictating that at all. It was giving cities the option to decide if it was best for their community or not, which gave me the impression, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that this isn't something that we have to do, because I heard Councilman Mays say that many states, cities in the state of Michigan or other states are doing it, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that they're not saying, hey, you need to have this. They're saying, should you choose to have it based on what you deem to be best for your community, these are some guidelines that we think might be helpful. Is that correct?
You're absolutely correct.
Okay.
There's proposed legislation currently pending in the state that would leave it to the discretion of municipalities to regulate dispensaries, but it's not required. The legislation would not require local municipalities to take this step.
Okay, so do we as a community have the ability, and I really would like for us to really do some research, do we have the ability to look at the implication? We talked about implementing something in the school systems the other day, the Pathway to Happiness, in which many of my colleagues were asking, what are the measurable benefits to implementing this program? I would hope that even now, if there is some data in our city that would share with us that this is a benefit and this is why we have thus and so cases, and this is why, you know what I mean? Like with liquor licenses, you can only have so many based on population. And so even in our legislation, I would like to see something that says, based on a population of this, how many do we actually have that have these marijuana cards that need access to this? And based on that, we need to make sure that we don't go to more than dispensaries than we need to. I would like to just implement that in. And the hours, I don't know about the hours. It seems like the one that I was in, they were open until like 2 or 3 in the morning. And so maybe that's a good regulated hour, but on Dort Highway, just seems like the time that nightclubs close down, and that's when they close down. So that didn't really make me, and I don't know when people get sick, don't get me wrong. I know we go to emergency. I'm just saying it still was alarming. But thank you guys for listening to me.
Thank you, Councilperson Galloway. I got Councilman Mays and then Councilman Freeman.
Yeah, I would encourage the council members and or the public to attend the legislative committee meetings. That's where the information and the details, I would request that the council people read and look at the ordinance, and the public read and look at the ordinance and make any recommendations. I would say, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councilwoman Galloway, for the one specific one that you're concerned about, if you look on page 2 of the proposed ordinance of special regulated use, it would be 7 or 8 medical marijuana type dispensaries, one named Michigan Organic Solutions on South Dordt Highway, one named Med Station on South Dordt Highway. At the bottom of page 2, you see some provision centers and some footnotes. Those are the 7 or 8 that I'm referring back to committee. We want to look at what's grandfathered in. If the one you're concerned about is not on that list, they might not even be able to locate that once this ordinance is enacted. The effect of it would be, if they're not on the list grandfathered in, they would have to move from, you know, the area that you're concerned with and might not be able to locate. So you got to be able to really understand the application. And my belief is a little different from yours, Councilwoman Galloway. I believe that since people in Flint can have medical marijuana cards issued under state law, that we are already allowing people to grow. And my concern is not only can they already grow, but they can grow in their home. And if you understand the definition of this, back when we were shaping it, a medical marijuana dispensary might be 2 or more. So if you had one person growing at home, they can do that anyway under state law. But when it gets into 2 or more and then move into the commercial arena, then a lot of this is being regulated. 2 or more in the home, I raised issues, would they be subject to $5,000? When I listen to Ms. Pierce talk about in industrial or commercial areas, I'm concerned as well, because I do know of somebody who's proposing a hospital with doctors and things of that nature as this thing's developed. So I'll close by saying this. Mr. President, I appreciate you allowing this type of discussion on something that a lot of people have watched and anticipated in the public discussion. Look forward to colleagues and or the public attending the committee meeting where the details are talked about. In council, details are in committee meetings. I hope Mr. Chair and the city attorney allow for enough time to discuss detail in committee meeting on this important issue. And I look forward to doing my private work, and I encourage people to read this privately as we move into second reading. Mr. President, as we get ready to vote, and I know I see Mr. Freeman, but as we get ready to vote, can you ask Mr. Bay to give me and the public and my colleagues a time frame between first, second reading? We'll be voting for first reading. What is an anticipated time frame for second reading, any public hearings on this, and then passage? Can he walk us through that?
I will.
You can?
I can.
Okay.
So-
Just for the public, I want the public to know
When
the
this
time
passes,
frame.
when this passes tonight, if this passes tonight,
Which reading?
let me correct myself.
Right.
If this passes for first reading tonight, it will be at the September meeting for second reading and public hearing and adoption, and then it will go into effect upon publication if we do immediate effect, or if we do not do immediate effect, which takes 6 votes of the council, then it would go into effect within 30 days and publication. Okay? Clarified?
So if everything goes right and we don't kick it back for first read, no major amendments, it looks like we would have a medical
October.
marijuana provision on the book
the end of
somewhere in
October.
October.
At the end of October, 1st of November.
Thank you, Mr. President.
You're welcome, Councilman Mays. I'm going to go on to Councilman Freeman, and then we're going to take the vote.
I just want to get some clarification from Councilwoman Galloway. Were you asking whether or not we had to allow dispensaries in our community, or whether we could say we don't want dispensaries, or were you asking a different question?
No, I was saying that it was my understanding that the legislation that was passed didn't dictate that we had to. It gave us the option to decide yes or no to
Okay.
having them in the community.
And I don't know, I mean, from the way the attorney responded, I'm not sure that he understood that to be your question. Is that what, or am I?
Yep, I did understand your question. The legislation has not passed, though, it's just been proposed.
Right, which means that as a community, we can say yes to dispensaries or we can say no.
That's correct.
And
At this time.
Mr. President, I wanted to say this through you to Councilwoman Galloway. A dispensary is defined in some cases as 2 or more caregivers.
I just wanted to know if we had
But
the
as
option.
far as the growth and the caregiving of marijuana, it's already in the community, and now we're going to see how it's allowed and how it's regulated. So we don't have the right to say people can't have cards and be caregivers on a certain level, but what we're defining as a dispensary, it could be defined, and that's the ordinance. So I want us to really look at the definition of what a dispensary is that we're defining based upon, certain criteria. But we already have caregivers and people who can grow so many plants of marijuana under state law.
Okay,
I wasn't done with my questions.
okay.
So,
I'm
with
sorry.
that understanding that there's legislation pending, does that mean currently that we can act to stop these dispensaries? Or does the legislation that's pending, is that what would give us that authority?
No, we could currently stop the dispensaries.
So then what is the pending legislation for them?
The state law at this point is, allows for patients to have medical marijuana cards and allows for caregivers, but what it doesn't really address is the provisioning piece. And that's what a lot of cities have been wrestling with is, okay, so somebody has glaucoma and they get a medical marijuana card, but how do they get the medical marijuana? And if they want to have a grow facility in their house and 5 plants, they can do it that way. But there's been a lot of confusion over how you get the product to the patient. And so the state law is now attempting to fill that gap and leave it up to municipalities. So in a way, the legislation will address the issue of dispensaries, or provisioning centers is the new term.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to have the clerk, and then we're going to vote.
Well, can I ask one more question? Attorney Bay, then if they do rule or pass down a ruling that tells how those residents can have access to that, right? Does that change the fact that we can say no or yes?
It doesn't change it at all.
Okay.
The proposed statute makes very clear that it's a local decision for the municipality to decide whether this is something that's good for our community or not. And if it's good for our community, we decide how we regulate it.
Thank you.
Ms. Brown, and then we're going to vote.
Okay. We've worked closely with Mr. Bade on this particular ordinance, on all of these ordinances, since we do the business licenses for, I can't remember how many years now, probably 3 years.
Yeah.
But in that regard, we've had to change a couple of titles on the ordinances a number of times, and I want to pose this question to Mr. Bade, because I don't know if it should be corrected or not. On the first ordinance, where we're calling it the provisioning centers now, on page 1, we're calling it provisioning centers. That's under 140500.
Right.
And then in the zoning component, instead of calling it, that's under 140501 on page 2, we're listing it as medical marijuana dispensaries. So my question is, should we not be consistent in terms of calling them provisional centers, or do we want to call them dispensaries?
They should be called provisioning centers throughout, and if you look at the footnote on the zoning, it refers to provisioning centers, so it should be referred to provisioning centers in all sections.
So in that regard, though, at the top of page 2, of the item that I mentioned, under subsection 5, group E, we're calling them medical marijuana dispensaries and not provisioning centers.
Yeah, that
So
should be amended.
it should be changed to,
It should.
okay, if we could
We'll
move for that change.
Could I get someone to make a motion to amend it from medical marijuana dispensary, that provision, to provision center? It's been moved and supported. Roll on the proposed
Any
amendment.
discussion on the amendment?
I'm sorry?
Discussion on the amendment?
Okay, discussion, I'm sorry. Councilman Mays?
No, so what is this motion is to all throughout where it says medical
Just that one
Just
section.
it's only in one
That's the only
section.
place- Just that one section is the only place where it refers to as marijuana dispensary. All the rest of them.
And so it'll go through in first reading with that amended correction, and that should be it. Okay, thanks.
Roll, Madam Clerk, on the amendment.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes on the amendment.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Ms. Galloway?
Yes.
Ms. Van Buren?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Mays?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Yes.
The vote is 9 yes, 0 no on the amendment.
Okay, on the ordinances, they were both moved and they were both supported, and we've had plenty of discussion on them. Roll, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Davis?
Yes.
Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Ms. Galloway?
Yes.
Ms. Van Buren?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Mays?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Yes.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
The vote is 9 yes, 0 no.
Okay, and we have the one add-on ordinance, it's 140502, which will be posed in our record. And again, it is the amendment to the International Fire Code. It was recommended by the International Fire Code Council for the fire department.
So
Move
moved.
it.
Support.
Support. Move it and support.
Discussion?
Yeah, Mr. President, based upon the way we do our agenda, I'm apologizing to the public because we always allowed the public to speak before we took action, and I'm sure it's people heard us discussing. So, I'm going to vote in favor of this, and you've seen how I voted, but I really apologize to the public for the agenda that's followed, because normally the public could have spoke on any of this stuff before we took action. It's the most ridiculous way of me to do business, and I really don't like the way that this agenda is set up for the emergency manager. I appreciate the public's patience, because it looks like after this vote that I'm going to vote in favor of, then we'll hear from the public after the fact. And I'm kind of appalled by this agenda, and I respectfully request that we are able to do our agenda the right way for the people.
Thank you, Councilman Mays. Roll, Madam Clerk.
Mr. Davis?
Yes. I mean, here.
Yes. Mr. Neely?
Yes.
Ms. Galloway?
Yes.
Ms. Van Buren?
Yes.
Mr. Kincaid?
Yes.
Mr. Mays?
Yes.
Ms. Poplar?
Yes.
Mr. Nolden?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
The vote is 9 yes, 0 no on 140502.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And to the public, all of these ordinances will be before the City Council in September, and there'll be a public hearing on each one of them at that time. This is a time set aside for members of the audience to address the City Council. Madam Clerk will call your name. Please come to the microphone. You'll have 3 minutes to address the City Council. And first to be called this evening,
First to be called is Mr. Arnell Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell.
Hello, Mr. Mitchell. A little bit, I reside at 579 East Linden Street Avenue. For YouTube, that's the address, 550 Well, anyway, I wanted to talk about that, falling through the cracks. We got the mayor, that financial management gives somebody 60 days to count down to judgment. And for the record, I wanted to be known that, the Reverend, it should be impeached, that guy across the street, this sheriff, instead of letting him go, that they got the councilman Mays locked up in jail. And I want to know, push comes to shove, Mays can get it done before 60 days. I want that to be put on record. And like, and Scott, you giving somebody 3 minutes to address this kangaroo court you in a court system you done turned it into. Over there you even got the judge Farrells. Don't know how to, he know how to operate, but he just, man, what I'm saying is, man, push Mays one more time and then you'll see how fast you can give us 40 days before 60 days. And man, you know good well, I wasn't supposed to say a whole lot of stuff, but them 3 minutes, being careful what I say, address you the president, and Inez, I got to go through Inez to get to Peter Bays to put it on the record. And Miss Pop, and the fireman, the fire marshal Bill, talked about let me show me something. He showed us something. I want to congratulate him for catching them little rascals out there. He done the job by himself. It made the police department look bad. Always them vigilante guys jumping on grown folks, then let the teenagers get away. Arrested 19 grown up and 16 teenagers. That goes to show you, they give more respect to the teenagers in this city than just because of that sheriff over there. Y'all impeach that like you started.
Thank you, R.L. Our next speaker,
Appreciate your
Madam Clerk.
support, R.L.
Our next speaker is Mrs. Bethany Hazard. Mrs. Hazard?
I'm Bethany Hazard. I live at 2553 Swayze. I've seen a lot of change in my neighborhood, not for the good, in the last maybe 4 or 5 years. And it's really sad when I talk to people that are moving. I talked to another older gentleman today moving, put his whole life into the neighborhood. But he's not happy the way the city is going. Nobody's happy with the water. Another older lady, she gets on her knees and cuts the grass around her sidewalk. She's leaving. What you're creating is blight by the actions, by not sending the police to the neighborhood when you started with that. I have neighbors that call me that moved, telling me their water bills, like for a month, $18 for 3 people, telling me to move. You guys should wake up and see what's really going on in the neighborhood. My neighborhood is all rentals. I'm the last one on my block just about that owns my home. I'm one of those people that I'm way below poverty level since we bought this house when my daughter was alive. My house was $68,000. It's worth $15,000. And I can't get a water discount because only 3.5% of my tax goes to the city. Well, you guys are the ones that took out the garbage pickup and the street light thing so nobody can get a discount. What's the sense of me staying here? I'm fighting blight every day. I go get outside, pick up garbage, constantly calling the police on your renters you'd rather have than the homeowners that live there. Because they're shooting off guns, selling drugs, standing under the street light, shooting out the street light I had to call. As soon as they had it in, they shot it out again. I live in West Flint. It's a shame how the city worked on making the neighborhood ghetto. The only thing I see you working on downtown in your favorite areas. I'm angry about it. The water rates are atrocious. It's sad seeing people in my neighborhood going without water. It is a shame. In this country, people do not have water. We have the Great Lakes. My neighbor that moved to Nevada where they pumped it in from stinking Colorado. I have another neighbor that told me they're gonna buy a new car. With the the money they're saving on water. You ought to think about what you're doing to neighborhoods, destroying neighborhoods and people's lives.
Mr. President, can you explain to the public why we ain't responding and, in between?
Yeah, the emergency manager issued an order for us to respond at the end of all public speakers, and council members will then have the opportunity to respond to your concerns. So it's not that we don't want to interact with you, we're just following his order at this time.
Because some people, yes.
Our next speaker is Ms. Danita Pikes. Ms. Pikes?
Good evening. My name is Danita Pikes. My address is 1810 Terrace Court. And what I'd like to bring to this council's attention is the road condition on Terrace. When you come into the subdivision, it's the Country Club Meadows subdivision. If you're entering the subdivision from Cherokee, and if you turn left, the road currently, it's not a sinkhole yet, but there's it needs some attention. Someone needs to at least come and look at it. It's a high traffic area. I consider it a high traffic area because I sit on my porch during the summertime, and probably say within a 5 to 10 minute span, you're looking at maybe 40 to 50 cars coming and going. Because when you enter the subdivision, there's residential homes, and then if you continue into the subdivision, there's also an apartment complex, which is the Country Club Meadows apartment complex. And that being my community, I'd like to see something done before the road condition gets worse. Then we may have liability as far as property damage or physical damage to a person. And my home is, as I back out of my driveway Monday through Friday, leaving home, going to work, if it becomes a sinkhole, I can see the traffic being impeded, so there could possibly be issues with people coming and going the subdivision. There's more than one entrance into the subdivision, but that I see, again, because my home is near the entrance if you're coming down Cherokee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ms. Ann Metcalf. Mrs. Metcalf?
Good evening, Council President.
Good evening.
My name is Aletha Ann Metcalf. I live at 1822 Terrace Court, and I came here, Ms. Pikes covered the thing about the subhole, and it is bad. But I came because we need a stop sign. We have a stop sign at the corner of Cherokee and Terrace. When I come out of my driveway and I'm on the corner and I want to make the turn to go on to Cherokee, when there's cars parked in across the street at 1905 Terrace Court, it blocks the traffic coming from the apartments or from the area. And it's been several times when it's been near misses, when a person from the cul-de-sac is getting ready to turn and a car is zooming around the corner. It has been a time when I've even come out of Danita's driveway and I'm already backed out, and somebody's coming out of the apartment complex, and they're zooming. And with that hole there in the street like it is, they're going over to the left side to go around because they're trying to miss the hole. So it is really dangerous over there, and I'm afraid for the kids too when they're catching the bus because it's dark out. Well, it will be eventually when they catch the bus for school. Nobody's stopping. If the police want to get some tickets, they can come and sit in my my driveway or Danita's, and they would be able to clean up because they don't even do a roll through. They just drive through. Thank you. I hope you can get this addressed.
Thank you.
Mr. President, ain't no slick way to tell people that we hearing what they say, is it?
There's parts in my ward, so.
Yeah, I know it. I was just letting them know they were new. I had never seen them, and I know you're hearing them.
Address it at the end.
Right.
I've already addressed it.
Our next speaker is Mrs. Barbara Griffiths-Wilson. Ms. Wilson?
Hello, Council. My name is Barbara Griffith Wilson. I reside at 2026 Winus Avenue. I sit here and I listen to a lot of things, and some things I agree with and some things is, here and there. But I want to say that I'm appalled at the way Paul Herring was treated.
Amen.
I believe that if you were going to let him go, and I know you didn't do it. You didn't do it. You had nothing to do with it. But if he was going to be let go, he should have known 10 minutes before we come into this building. I think it's wrong. They say they're going to put it on YouTube, but a lot of the people who watch Channel 17 don't have access to YouTube.
Right.
Because a lot of them are little old ladies and little old men who are in their 80s and their 90s, and they're not trying to be bothered with YouTube. Now, there are some real hip ones that do that, but not all of them. And so I think it should be that not only if they want to do YouTube because they're so young and hip, then they should also consider Channel 17. Also make sure that it's on Channel 17.
Right.
That's the one issue I have. And the other issue I have is not really an issue, it's just sort of like a statement. When Councilwoman Galloway was talking about the medical marijuana, and it reminded me of the Prohibition days, how they forced people underground where people were selling hooch, as they called it, which was liquor, until the government could figure out how to tax it. And once they figured out how to tax it, then it was okay. It was open season. Anybody, just come on, we're going to have liquor stores. One thing I want to say about medical marijuana, although I could possibly use some, but I prefer not to, there is something called Rick Simpson's oil. All medical marijuana is not leafy and smokable.
Right.
But Rick Simpson's oil is used in many people who have cancer. It comes in a syringe. The syringe doesn't have a needle to it. It has a plastic cap on it, and you put 3 drops under your tongue the first day, and then you go 1 drop every day afterwards. I will say I tried it. I will say it made me woozy. I will say I gave it back. Because I don't want woozy, I want to feel normal. They said, well, it'll wear off after maybe 15 days. Well, that's too long for me. But I think that really, I think it needs to be decriminalized. Once it's decriminalized, then I think that the people that are in power can then regulate it. Because I think that children shouldn't be able to go into, I don't know what they call them, head shops or whatever they call them. I don't think children should be allowed to go in there. And I think they shouldn't have had water and candy for sale because that draws children. Because if I pass by and I'm a kid, I want some candy. Woo, 3 minutes went fast. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mr. Chris Del Moroni. Mr. Del Moroni.
Thank you. My name is Chris Del Moroni. I live in Flint, Michigan. There are many ways that a person can lose their home. They can stop making more